Once again, we have gathered together for worship. To worship means to hold up and honor what is important in your lives. Being together is important. Living in gratitude for the beauty all around us, never, ever taking it for granted. We live in an amazing, amazing place, and we hold up and honor the risk-taking it took us to get here. Living an ethical and moral life is important, and knowing when we stray that we are still loved here. We honor all that is, all that will be, and all of that stuff in between. The stuff I call life. Welcome this morning. Welcome to worship. To the Spirit of all life. In this hour we gather together, we are reminded of the continued suffering of others. Those still left in the cold and the dark from Hurricane Sandy, the tensions and the killings of the innocent in Gaza and Israel, and those within our own community who seek hope and healing from grief and loss. We also remember our transgendered brothers and sisters who, with sustained courage, come out and live the life they have always imagined, free of fear and free of bigotry. We remember those who have been victims of violence and hatred and stand with them to say enough. Enough killing and violence against those perceived as different. We gather here to celebrate diversity and honor our differences as part of the landscape that makes life here in Provincetown so rich in contributions and so colorful with characters. May we all here, safe in our community of differences, turn towards the suffering of the world so that our hearts may be stretched wide open and true compassion enters in. In our silent time together, may we reflect on the stirrings of your own heart. It is entitled To Risk, and your part is the italicized part. To laugh is to risk appearing the fool. To reach out for another is to risk exposing ourselves. To love is to risk not being loved in return. To try is to risk failure. May it be so. My friends, part of what we do here together on Sunday morning is offer our gifts of financial support to this church, our home. By our generosity, the church, through its people and programs, offer hope and peace and possibility to our bruised and hurting world. The offering for the continued vision and mission of this church will now be gratefully received and accepted while the choir comes forth to sing. Reading this morning is actually a story from the country of India that was told to me by my meditation teacher, Mr. S.N. Goenka. It is entitled Swimology. There was once a young and wise professor making a voyage across the sea. He was a highly educated man with practically an entire alphabet of degrees following his name, but he had little life experience. One of the crew members, an elderly man, befriended the young wise and learned man, and he would go each evening to the cabin of the learned gentleman to listen to him hold forth on a variety of subjects. One evening, As the old man was taking his leave from the professor's cabin, he inquired of him, "Old man, have you ever studied geology?" "Geology? Well, what is that, sir?" The old man replied. "Well, it is the science of the earth." "Oh, no, sir. I've never been to any school. I've never studied anything." "Old man," responded the young professor, "you have wasted a quarter of your life." Well, with that, the old man left feeling very, very sad, for this was a learned man. If he says, "I've wasted a quarter of my life," then surely this must be true. The next evening, the old man once again returned to the professor's cabin. "Old man," the professor asked, "have you ever studied oceanography?" "Oh, I know, sir. I've never studied anything," answered the old man. "What is that?" "It's the science of the sea," responded the young professor, shaking his head in disbelief. "Old man, you have wasted half of your life." Oh, feeling more depressed than ever, the old man left the cabin. "I have wasted a half of my life. This smart professor told me so it must be true." The next evening, the old man returned once again. The young professor questioned him, "Old man, have you ever studied meteorology?" "Oh, what is that, sir? I've never heard of anything." "Why, it's the science of the wind and the rain and the weather." "Oh, no, sir, I've never been to any college. I've never studied anything." With that, the professor shook his head once again. "Old man, you have wasted 3/4 of your life." The old man took his leave once again, feeling more sad and depressed than ever. And story is story. So the following evening, he returned once again to the young professor's cabin. "Do you know anything about psychology?" the young professor asked. "Oh, no, sir. I've never heard of such a word, psychology. What is that, sir?" "Well, it's the study of the human mind." "Old man, you have not studied about the earth on which you live. You have not studied the science of the sea on which you earn your living. You've not studied the science of the weather which you encounter every day, nor have you studied the workings of your own mind. Old man, you have wasted your entire life." Oh, the old man was very depressed now. This learned man says, "I've wasted my entire life. Certainly this must be true." The following day, it was the old man's turn. He came running to the cabin of the professor. Professor, sir, have you ever studied swimology?" "Swimology? What do you mean?" the professor asked. "Can you swim, sir?" "Oh, no, old man. I never learned how to swim," the professor replied. "Professor," the old man said, "you have wasted all of your life. You see, the ship has struck a rock and is sinking. Those who can swim may reach the nearby shore. Those who cannot were surely drowned. I'm so sorry, Professor, you have wasted your entire life." Here ends today's reading. I love that reading, that story, Swimology. I love it because it speaks so clearly about experience. You can have all the degrees you want. You can read all the books you want on the subject of swimming. You can sit back and watch all the swimming lessons you want. But until you take the risk and actually stepping into the water and swimming, you'll never learn that experience. Does anybody remember learning how to swim? A couple of people. Good. However, today's sermon is not about voyages or water or even swimming. Today's sermon is about taking risks. Now, like any good Unitarian Universalist minister, I went first to the dictionary, one of our holy books, as it were, to find the definition of the word risk. Well, according to the American Heritage Dictionary, risk is, and I quote, the possibility of harm or loss, danger, to expose to a chance of loss or damage. Risk. Man, talking about putting a damper on a sermon, it just all sounds so negative to me. Danger, damage, harm, loss. After looking at the dictionary, I typically return to my first profession working within the deaf culture. The sign in American Sign Language for the word risk has two different variants. The first is risk. Risk. Kind of a visual decapitation, if you will. A somewhat not so subtle symbol suggesting that one could lose one's head by taking risks. Not exactly what I would call a positive perspective for risk-taking. The second is risk. Risk, which comes from the sign of dangerous. Dangerous, you repeat it. Risk. Risk. Again, the suggestion that taking risk is somehow always dangerous. Yet isn't risk supposed to be about a choice and a consequence? You take a chance and you win or you lose. In an article titled Risk, the story of America's greatest idea, I love that title, author John Dickerson wrote, and I quote, "I want to remind myself and you of the buoyant, thrilling side of risk. People engaged in every kind of human endeavor say that taking a risk is the key to fulfillment and to success. It is at the heart of our biggest thrills and highest achievement. Ask someone when he or she felt most alive, and they will tell you a story about a risk they took." Unquote. This gives a whole new perspective on taking risks, a positive perspective, which invites thrills, fulfillment, happiness, and success. Robert Frost wrote about this in his poem, the poem we heard the choir sing so beautifully, "The Road Not Taken." "Two roads diverged in a wood, and I took the one less traveled by, and it has made all the difference." Taking the road less traveled, less trodden, less known is certainly taking a risk, and it does make all the difference. I was flying back to the United States after being out of the country for about 4 years, traveling through the South Pacific, New Zealand, Australia, and then working in Singapore for 2 years. I had a return ticket as I had not yet went to China or India, 2 countries that were very high on my priority list. As the plane headed toward New York, the flight pattern took us over Cape Cod, and looking down and seeing the perfect shape of the Cape, I recalled our family visits to Provincetown. Then the idea hit me straight on, so to speak. I would go to Provincetown. I would go to Provincetown for the winter and return to Asia in the spring to finish my traveling. Perhaps some of you have a similar story. I, of course, never left. I fell in love with this town, the Cape, and here I stayed. Was I taking a risk moving to a place where I knew absolutely no one, had no job, or no way of making a living? Absolutely. But I can tell you, I never felt so happy, fulfilled, and alive in my life. I recall my father questioning my decision. He thought I should return to Maryland, to my former job. After all, a job was a job. Fulfillment and happiness? What does that have to do with a job? It's work. It was the road less taken, and it made all the difference in my life. I believe many of us living here at the end of the world have taken that identical, less traveled road and perhaps share a similar story. Most recently, I have met 4 people who have taken that similar risk, moving here to Provincetown without knowing anyone, without a job, knowing that things may not work out. Yet risk-taking is not just about a single leap. It requires not just a moment of bravery, but a sustained courage to endure the uncertainty and the sometimes lonely experience of living off your imagination and off an idea that may or may not succeed. Risk-taking is nourishment for the soul. So I ask you, what is your perspective on taking risks? Is it a dangerous step taken with caution and wariness? Is fear a factor in risk-taking? Or do you weigh each factor in taking risks, plotting out your choices and consequences on paper, the pros and cons, until you come up to a logical conclusion, or a choice that you should make? Is there a should factor in your decision? I really should do this because, it's safer, it's easier, it's certainly less risky, it's familiar, it's convenient, it's comfortable. Are those important qualities to you, insisting you in taking a risk? Safety, familiarity, comfort. Or do you throw caution to the wind and go out on that limb because, after all, that's where the fruit is? And another infamous author puts it this way: of all the people I have ever known, those who have pursued their dreams and failed have lived a much more fulfilling life than those who have put their dreams on a shelf for fear of failure. Putting your dreams on a shelf for fear of failing. So what prevents us from taking some risks? Whether it's in our personal relationships, our health care, or our career changes. Is it fear of failing? Or is it about ridicule and laughter? As another wise person said, many great ideas have been lost because the people who had them could not stand being laughed at. What do we need to help us take more risks? I know sometimes the encouragement to take risks comes from the most unexpected of places. I did part of my ministerial internship at the Brewster Unitarian Universalist Church, working with the first Coming of Age program. Coming of Age, for those who may not know, is working with young teens to assist them in developing a sense of purpose and a sense of identity as a Unitarian Universalist. Interns are often given the youth groups. But to help develop a sense of group dynamics and trust, we took the 20-odd youth with us for a ropes course. Has anybody here been on a ropes course? Right, so you know what they're like, different swings and challenges, a variety of stunts, climbing and swinging. The most difficult one was one where the youth would climb up to a telephone pole. Climb a telephone pole, it had little studs things on it, and you stand on top of the telephone pole, and then you'd leap, trying to grasp a swinging trapeze. Now, of course, you are strapped in. We didn't want to lose our youth. And there is a spotter below with a net. The teens found this to be the absolute most exciting. I, being somewhat fearful of heights, stood by as a wonderful witness and an awesome cheerleader. This was until some of the youth, started to hassle me. That's my phrase. They used the word encouragement to try it myself. I laughed it off, saying, oh, no, I'm too old for such activities. This has not stopped them at all. Come on, they kept saying. You're always telling us to challenge ourselves and push our limits, take some risk. Then came the ultimate zinger. How do you expect us to respect you if you don't take some risks, like you're always telling us to do? I hate having my words thrown back at me. So I got harnessed up and began to climb. And climb. And climb. And climb. The most difficult part was maneuvering my very shaky legs and feet to stand atop a telephone pole. There's not a lot of space atop a telephone pole. I was frightened beyond belief and feeling like my self-respect was on the line. The youth were below, encouraging me onward, giving me lots of advice. No, put your right foot up first. No, put your left foot up. But I did it. And standing there atop that telephone pole, steadying my balance, I then leaped off, trying to grasp that swinging trapeze. Exactly. Now, I'd love to tell you that I caught it, but of course I did not. But I leaped, and I did it, and fell into the net below. But let me tell you, I came off of that telephone pole feeling like I could do absolutely anything. I felt so charged up and so alive. I imagined I could take on the whole world. The next week, I was scheduled to go before the Ministerial Relations Committee, the governing body that credentials Unitarian Universalist ministers. And I thought, bring them on. If I could leap off a telephone pole, I could do anything. It was taking risks as the key to fulfillment and to success. It was at the heart of one of my biggest thrills, and I didn't even catch the trapeze. Kierkegaard wrote, "To dare is to lose one's footing momentarily. To not dare is to lose oneself." I found a part of myself that I never knew I was there, and I owe a huge debt to the youth of First Parish Brewster for giving me that thrilling, thrill-seeking gift. And as I reflect back on those days, I realized there were two qualities that accompany me up that telephone pole. Qualities that can be of great help to anyone taking risks. These are the qualities of trust and faith. When I trust, writes Unitarian minister David Rankin, I am able to take risks, sail off on fresh adventures, and explore the regions of the world. Trust is saying yes to creation. Creation itself is a risk. Now, this is not the trust that says everything will always work out. Rather, it is a trust which allows us to engage in the process of discovering who we are and of creating what we will become. And with the quality of faith, it's not faith in some unseen deity, some invisible holy man, like the story of the young 4-year-old who had just spilled his cola on the rug and he wanted to clean up the mess himself. So his mother told him the mop was just outside the back door. So quickly he ran to the door but realized that it had become quite dark outside. Suddenly scared, he turned to his mother. He told his mother what the problem was. Assuring him, she told him that Jesus is everywhere, even in the dark places. And having faith in him is knowing he will always, always protect you. Well, this put a huge smile on the young boy's face, so he opened the back door just enough to poke his head out and called, "Jesus, if you're out there, hand me the mop." This is not the faith we are talking about, but rather it's a faith in oneself and in those around you that help you to know that you are loved for no matter what the consequences turn out to be. With the companions of trust and faith by our side, taking risk becomes less fearful, perhaps less frightening, and it may turn out to be a way of survival. Several years ago, a young Israeli soldier was on the watch in the West Bank sector of Israel. Now it's Gaza. Before it was the West Bank. The history is known to most of us. The West Bank is holy ground to both the Jews and the Muslims. Fierce battles have been waged over who would control the land and who would live there. Israeli soldiers mounted constant areas with liberation fighters maintained harassing actions in every form. The Palestinian children learned through the years of witness to hide behind buildings and throw rocks and bottles at the Israeli sentries. It was nighttime in the West Bank, and the young Israeli soldier had become separated from the rest of his squad. The street lamps were darkened, and the road was piled high with debris. Suddenly he was ambushed, surrounded by a group of Palestinian children, 8 or 9 years old. They began hurling stones at him with vengeance. One rock glanced off his scalp, and blood trickled down from the wound. Panic gripped the soldier. He was in danger of serious injury and equipped with firepower for his protection. Swiftly he raised his weapon and trained his sight on the children. His finger trembled on the trigger as he stared into the faces contorted by loathing. Yet still he couldn't bring himself to shoot down these young warriors, grown old with hatred, with the brush of innocence still on their cheeks. In despair, he stretched his heart and found not an enemy, but children. Children. Young Palestinian children. Children. So taking a risk, he was inspired to try another way. The soldier lowered his gun, bent to the ground, and picked up a handful of the stones that had bruised his body. In light born out of desperation, he began to juggle the rocks as if they were brightly colored balls. The children were entranced, and gradually they put down their weapons and gathered closer to the soldier. Smiles of delight transformed their faces as their enemy changed into a friend. And the children were innocent once more. My friends, may we all be encouraged to take some risks in our life. Risks that may be a matter of survival. Risks that allow us to discover qualities we never knew we had. And risks that thrill and excite and gives this gift of life wondrous fulfillment and great, great success. Progress always involves taking risks. Behold the turtle. He makes progress only when he sticks his neck out. Amen, and blessed be. Never be afraid to try something new. Remember, amateurs built the Ark, professionals built the Titanic. One does not discover new lands without consenting to lose sight of the shore for a very long time. Risk is jumping off the cliff and building your wings on the way down. If you don't take risks, you'll have a wasted soul.